At Christmas, his mistress got a $30
I
million
cannot lose
Rolls-Royce.
you.
She got a $2 piggy bank. She
I
drove
have made
away.
my choice.
Then her husband left a voicemail. Return the car, or we'll report it stolen. The car was in her name. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family channel. May the Almighty surround every woman with a shield of pure light, protecting her spirit, honoring her sacrifices, and blessing her with a peace so deep it silences every storm. May your hearts be lifted, your bodies strengthened, and your souls comforted by a love that never leaves your side. You are the quiet miracle in every home, the gentle wisdom behind every success, and the soft strength that keeps this world from breaking. I pray your life receives the joy you give, the kindness you plant, and the patience you live with every day. May your tears turn into blessings, your worries melt into hope, and your path open with opportunities created just for you. You deserve respect that never lowers, love that never fails, and happiness that grows around you like a warm sunrise. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, write, I am with Mr. Peter. Let's start with love. Sophie Wilde's hands didn't shake when she unwrapped the plastic piggy bank. They didn't shake when she found 2 crumpled dollar bills inside, rubber-banded together like trash. They didn't shake when she heard Drew's laughter echoing from the driveway, his voice pitched high with champagne and victory. They didn't shake when she walked to the window and saw her husband, the man who'd promised her forever, filming Monica Stalter, opening the doors of a Rolls-Royce that cost more than most people's homes. Her hands didn't shake until she saw Monica kiss him, not a polite kiss, not a grateful kiss, a possession kiss, the kind of kiss that said mine in a language everyone understood. Drew's hand moved to Monica's waist, like it belonged there, like he'd done it 1,000 times, like Sophie didn't exist at all. That's when her hands started shaking. Sophie walked outside in her Christmas morning robe, bare feet on cold concrete, while Drew and Monica toasted with glasses that caught the winter sun. Neither of them noticed her. Drew was too busy filming Monica sliding into the driver's seat, her sequined dress riding up her thighs, her laughter sharp as broken crystal. "Baby, this is too much!" Monica squealed, running her hands over the steering wheel like she was petting something alive. "Nothing's too much for you," Drew said, and Sophie heard something in his voice she hadn't heard in years. Joy. Real, unfiltered joy. Sophie approached the car slowly, her bare feet silent on the driveway. Monica saw her first, and the smile that spread across her face wasn't embarrassment. It was triumph, pure, calculated triumph. "Oh, Sophie, Merry Christmas! Isn't Drew just the most generous man alive?" Monica's voice dripped with honey and poison in equal measure. Sophie ignored her. She looked at the papers resting on the passenger seat, the title, the registration, the loan document stamped and official. She picked them up with steady hands now, hands that had stopped shaking the moment she saw her own name printed at the top in bold letters. "Sophie, put those down," Drew started, his voice edged with warning. "My name," Sophie said quietly, her voice carrying in the cold morning air. "The title is in my name, Drew." Drew's face shifted, confusion flickering to irritation, then to something darker, something that looked like fear trying to hide behind anger. "That's just paperwork. The car's for Monica. I used your credit because mine was tied up in investments. You forged my signature." The words hung between them like smoke from a gun. Drew's jaw tightened. "I didn't forge anything. You signed papers 6 months ago for investment opportunities. You just don't remember because you never pay attention to these things." "I remember everything, Drew." Sophie folded the papers carefully and tucked them under her arm. She reached into the car, her movements deliberate, and took the keys from the ignition. Monica's smile finally cracked, splintering at the edges. "Excuse me, those are mine." Monica's voice rose, losing its honeyed tone. "No," Sophie said, looking directly at the woman who'd been sleeping with her husband for months, who'd been texting him during their anniversary dinner, who'd been the reason Drew came home smelling like perfume that wasn't Sophie's. "They're mine. My name. My signature. My car. My credit that you both destroyed." She turned and walked back into the house, each step measured and calm. Past the Christmas tree she'd decorated alone while Drew worked, late. Past the stockings she'd hung with care while he was supposedly at the office. Past the photo albums filled with a life that had been disintegrating for years while she'd pretended not to notice the signs. In their bedroom, soon to be just his bedroom, she changed into jeans and a sweater. She packed one bag, not because she was being dramatic, but because she was being practical. Everything else could be dealt with later. Right now, she needed to move before the shock wore off and the pain set in. Drew burst through the bedroom door, phone clutched in his hand like a weapon. "Sophie, you're being ridiculous. Give me the keys right now." "No, that car cost $30 million. Then you shouldn't have put it in my name without asking. You shouldn't have forged loan documents. You shouldn't have used my credit to impress your mistress." Sophie's voice was still quiet, still calm, and that seemed to unsettle Drew more than screaming would have. "I'll report it stolen. I'll have you arrested for grand theft auto." Sophie smiled then, a smile that made Drew take a step back. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just realized they held all the cards and their opponent had been bluffing the entire hand. "You do that, Drew. Report that your wife stole the car you bought for your mistress using forged loan documents and her credit. I'm sure the police will be very sympathetic. The state bar might be interested too. I wonder what they think about lawyers who commit financial fraud." She walked past him, bag over her shoulder, keys jingling in her pocket. Drew grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. "You're not leaving. We're going to sit down and talk about this like adults." "Adults?" Sophie pulled her arm free, leaving red marks where his fingers had been. She looked at those marks for a long moment, committing them to memory. Evidence. Adults don't humiliate their wives on Christmas morning. Adults don't forge signatures. Adults don't film their mistresses like they're directing a music video while their wives are inside opening $2 gifts wrapped in plastic and mockery. She kept walking. Drew followed her down the stairs, through the house they'd bought together with her inheritance money, out to her car, her actual car, the 8-year-old Honda she'd been driving because Drew said they needed to save money. The same Drew who just spent $30 million on a car for another woman. Drew stood in front of the driver's door, blocking her. "Where are you going to go? You don't have anywhere to go. You don't have anyone. I'm all you have, Sophie." Sophie looked at her husband, really looked at him, saw the desperation behind the anger, saw the panic behind the control, saw the man who'd spent 15 years making her believe she was nothing without him. "I have myself," she said. "That's more than I had this morning." She got in the car. Drew didn't move. She started the engine. He stepped aside at the last second, and she pulled out of the driveway without looking back at the house, at Drew, at the life she was leaving in ruins behind her. She drove for over an hour, her mind blank and buzzing at the same time. The shock was wearing off now, and underneath it was something that felt like electricity running through her veins. Not quite fear, not quite anger. Something new. Something that felt dangerously close to freedom. She pulled into a storage facility she'd seen advertised on the highway. 24-hour access, maximum security, and paid cash for a 6-month rental on a climate-controlled unit. The attendant didn't ask questions. Sophie drove the Rolls-Royce inside, locked it behind a steel door, and pocketed the only key. $30 million, sitting in the dark, useless without her permission. Then she checked into a hotel that smelled like industrial cleaner and rented rooms by the week. She sat on the bed with its rough sheets and stared at her phone, waiting for it to ring, waiting for Drew to call and apologize, waiting for him to realize what he'd done. The phone didn't ring, not for 3 hours. When Drew finally called, Sophie let it go to voicemail. She watched the notification light blink, waited for the voicemail to process, then played it on speaker. Drew's voice came through tight and controlled, the voice he used with opposing counsel, the voice that said he was barely holding back rage. "Bring back the car, Sophie, I'm serious. That's theft, grand theft auto. I will prosecute this. I will have you arrested and charged. Return it now, within the hour, or I'm calling the police and pressing charges. This isn't a game." Sophie played the message twice, memorizing the threat, the fury, the assumption that she would break, that she would come crawling back, terrified of the consequences. Then she called her own voicemail and left Drew a message. "Read the title. Check the signature you forged on the loan papers. Count how many laws you broke to buy your mistress a car. Then call your attorney, because mine will be calling you tomorrow. See you in divorce court, Drew." She hung up and blocked his number. Then she blocked Monica's number. Then she turned off her phone completely and lay down on the hotel bed. For the first time in 15 years of marriage, Sophie Wilde was alone in a space that belonged to no one. A room where no one would criticize how she slept, what she wore, how loudly she breathed. A room where she didn't have to be small or quiet or convenient. She closed her eyes and slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, the sun was setting through cheap curtains and her phone, turned back on, was full of messages she would never read. 17 texts from Drew, 12 from Monica, 3 from Drew's mother, 5 from numbers she didn't recognize. She deleted them all without opening a single one. The plastic piggy bank was still in her overnight bag, those $2 still inside. She should have thrown it away, should have left it on the kitchen counter with all the other garbage from her marriage, but something made her keep it. Not sentimentality, not hope, evidence. Evidence of the exact moment her husband showed her what she was worth to him. $2, wrapped in plastic, given with a smile. Sophie put the piggy bank on the nightstand and stared at it until the room went dark again. Then she turned on the cheap lamp, pulled out her laptop, and searched for divorce attorneys who specialized in financial fraud and spousal abuse. By midnight, she'd sent consultation requests to 7 different firms, all of them with 5-star reviews and reputations for destroying unfaithful husbands in court. By morning, 5 had already responded, and 1, Patricia Chen, known as the executioner in legal circles, had written, "I would be honored to represent you. Your husband made a significant mistake. Let's make sure he never forgets it." Sophie read that message 3 times and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Power. Drew Gosling had built his career on winning, on being smarter, faster, more ruthless than everyone else. He'd built his reputation on never losing, on crushing opponents before they knew the fight had started. He was about to learn what it felt like to lose everything to someone he'd underestimated for 15 years. Sophie smiled in the dark hotel room and began composing her response to Patricia Chen. The war had just begun, and Drew didn't even know it yet. Chapter 2. The Man Who Built Castles on Lies. Drew Gosling found out his wife had filed for separation at 6 in the morning from his secretary. "Mr. Gosling, there's a process server in the lobby. He says it's urgent." Drew had been awake all night. Monica had stopped answering his calls after Sophie drove away with the Rolls-Royce. His texts went unread. His voicemails piled up like garbage. By 3 in the morning, he'd realized Monica wasn't coming back to the hotel suite he'd been paying for. "Send him up," Drew said, his voice rough from lack of sleep and too much whiskey. The process server handed him the envelope without ceremony or sympathy. "Sign here." Drew signed with numb fingers, tore open the envelope, and felt his stomach drop through the floor. Separation papers, financial fraud allegations, a petition to freeze all joint accounts pending investigation, documentation of forged signatures, copies of bank statements showing Sophie's inheritance money funding their entire life while Drew spent his salary on Monica. And worse, so much worse, photographs. Monica and Drew at restaurants, at hotels, time-stamped and dated. Sophie had known for months, had been gathering evidence while he thought she was oblivious. At 7 in the morning, his phone rang. The senior partner, voice cold as January. "My office now." Drew arrived at the firm to find 3 partners waiting in the conference room. The door closed behind him with a sound like a vault ceiling shut. "Did you forge your wife's signature on a $30 million loan?" The senior partner's voice was flat, empty of the warmth he usually showed Drew. Drew opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, searching for the right words, the perfect argument, the winning strategy. Nothing came. It's complicated. That's a yes or no question, Drew. Technically, yes, but she would have signed if I'd asked. It was a misunderstanding. Stop talking. The senior partner slid a folder across the polished conference table. Your wife's attorney sent this to the state bar this morning at 6. You're under formal investigation for document fraud, forgery, and potential embezzlement of marital assets. We're recommending you take an immediate and indefinite leave of absence. You're suspending me. Drew's voice rose. I'm 3 months away from making senior partner. You're lucky we're not firing you outright. The youngest partner spoke now, his voice tight with barely contained anger. You committed fraud, Drew. Document fraud using your wife's identity. We have clients who trust us with their life savings, their businesses, their futures. How does that look when one of our partners is under investigation for forging his wife's signature to buy his mistress a car? How does everyone know about Monica? Drew asked, though he already knew. He could feel it, the story spreading like wildfire through their professional circles. The partners exchanged looks. The senior partner turned his laptop around. A gossip website, headline in bold red. High-powered lawyer cons wife to fund mistress's luxury lifestyle. Exclusive interview inside. Monica's face filled the screen, tears streaming down her cheeks, voice breaking with manufactured emotion. Drew clicked play on the video, his hands shaking. I had no idea he was married, Monica said, dabbing at her eyes with tissue. He told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife was vindictive and difficult. When he gave me that beautiful car, I thought it was real love. I thought we had a future. Then I found out, her voice broke convincingly, then I found out he forged his wife's signature, that the car wasn't even his to give. I feel so used, so manipulated. I'm just a victim in all of this. Drew stared at the screen. Monica had sold him out, completely, positioned herself as the innocent party while he burned. The video had 3 million views. The comments were vicious. Get out, the senior partner said. Security will escort you. Your desk has been cleared. We'll mail your personal effects. You can't just... We can, and we are. Find a good attorney, Drew. You're going to need one. Drew walked out of the building where he'd worked for 12 years, where he'd won cases and made his reputation, where he'd climbed toward partnership like it was oxygen. Security escorted him to the lobby. His keycard was deactivated, his phone access to the firm's servers cut off. By the time he reached his car, he'd received 17 text messages from colleagues and friends. Most said some version of the same thing. What the hell, man? His college roommate's text was more direct. Don't contact me again. I have daughters. I don't associate with men who treat women like property. By noon, Drew's phone had become a weapon aimed at his own head. His mother's voicemail played on repeat in his mind. Your father and I are ashamed. We taught you better than this. We raised you to be a man of character. Where did we go wrong? His father's email, subject line, empty, body even emptier. You are not the son I raised. You are not the man I thought I knew. Don't contact me until you've fixed what you've broken, if you can fix it at all. I have my doubts. Drew drove to the hotel suite where Monica had been staying, the suite he'd paid for with a credit card that was probably about to be frozen. The front desk informed him she'd checked out that morning. Did she leave a forwarding address? The clerk looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out that information. I paid for that room. I have a right... Sir, Ms. Stalter specifically requested that we not give you any information. She said if you came by, we should tell you to contact her attorney. Drew felt something crack inside his chest. Monica had an attorney now. Monica, who'd whispered, I love you, 3 days ago. Who'd said she couldn't imagine life without him. Who'd cried when he gave her the Rolls-Royce keys. He called her number. It rang once, then went to an automated message. The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service. She'd changed her number, blocked him, erased him. Drew drove to her apartment building. the luxury building in the downtown district where he'd paid her rent for 8 months. The doorman stopped him in the lobby. "I'm sorry, sir. Ms. Stolter moved out yesterday. She left no forwarding information." Monica had vanished like smoke, like she'd never existed at all. Drew went home to the penthouse Sophie's inheritance had paid the down payment for, the penthouse where they'd celebrated anniversaries and promotions and made plans for a future that was now ash. Sophie's things were gone. Not all of them, just hers. Her books, her clothes, the ridiculous collection of teacups Drew had always complained about. The spaces where her life had been looked like missing teeth in a smile. Drew poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, then 6, then stopped counting. His phone buzzed. His attorney, his personal attorney, because the firm's attorneys wouldn't touch him now. "Drew, we need to talk about your wife's demands." "What demands?" Drew's voice was already slurred. "She wants the house, full ownership of the Rolls-Royce, half your retirement accounts, and 5 years of spousal support calculated at your current, well, your former salary. She's also threatening a civil suit for financial fraud and emotional distress if you contest anything. She can't have the house. That's my... Actually, Drew, her inheritance paid the down payment. In this state, that makes it her separate property. You'll be lucky to keep your furniture." "What about the car? I can sell it. Pay off. The title's in her name. She has full legal ownership. You can't touch it without her permission, which I'm guessing you won't get." Drew hung up without responding. He threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack, but kept working, kept buzzing with messages he didn't want to read. He sat in the dark penthouse for hours, drinking, spiraling, watching his life collapse in real time on social media. The story had exploded. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone was on Sophie's side. Wife gets ultimate revenge on cheating husband. Lawyer loses everything after forging wife's signature. The $30 million mistake that destroyed a marriage. Drew's face was everywhere. His reputation in ruins, his career over, his marriage destroyed. And somewhere out there, Sophie was sleeping peacefully while he couldn't sleep at all. He stumbled to the kitchen and found the plastic piggy bank sitting on the counter where Sophie had left it. He picked it up, shook it, heard the $2 rattle inside like teeth in a skull. He tried to remember why he'd given it to her. Had it been a joke? Had he really thought it was funny to give his wife a $2 gift while filming his mistress unwrapping a car that cost more than some people made in a lifetime? What kind of man had he become? His phone buzzed one last time. Sophie's attorney. "Mr. Gosling, if you attempt to contact Sophie Wilde directly in any way, we will file for a restraining order and pursue criminal harassment charges. All communication goes through my office. Have your attorney contact me by end of day tomorrow, or we proceed with criminal fraud charges. Your choice." Drew read the message 5 times. Then he opened the piggy bank with shaking hands and pulled out the 2 crumpled dollars. There was a receipt tucked underneath, so old it was nearly transparent. Faded ink, barely legible. Cafe Luna, 2 coffees, $2, split payment. Their first date, 20 years ago, when they were broke college students who split a $2 coffee because neither of them could afford to pay for both. When Sophie had laughed at his terrible jokes and said yes when he asked if she wanted to meet again next week. Drew held the receipt and tried to remember that woman. The woman with the bright smile and the easy laugh. The woman who'd believed in him when he had nothing. The woman who'd built a life with him from nothing. He couldn't see her face anymore, couldn't remember her voice. Somewhere between that coffee shop and this penthouse, Sophie Wilde had disappeared, and Drew had never even noticed. He'd been too busy climbing, winning, conquering, too busy destroying the only real thing he'd ever had. Drew put the receipt back in the piggy bank and set it carefully on the counter. Then he walked to the bedroom that still smelled like Sophie's perfume and lay down on sheets she'd washed one last time before leaving. He stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, and when his phone buzzed at dawn with another message, he didn't have the strength to look at it. Drew Gosling had spent his entire career learning how to win. Now he was learning what it felt like to lose everything that mattered. And the lesson had only just begun. Chapter 3. The Woman Who Stopped Apologizing. 3 weeks after Christmas, Sophie woke up in Eleanor's guest room and realized she'd slept through the night without waking once. No alarms jolting her awake, no Drew's snoring, no 3 in the morning phone calls about case strategy that could have waited until morning. Just sleep. Deep, uninterrupted, restorative sleep that left her feeling like she'd surfaced from underwater after years of holding her breath. She hadn't slept like this since before the wedding. Eleanor knocked softly on the door. "Coffee's ready whenever you want it. No rush." No rush. Those 2 words hit Sophie harder than she expected. When was the last time someone had said that to her? Drew had schedules for everything. Breakfast at exactly 6, gym at 7, dinner at 8 sharp. Their entire marriage had been a timetable Sophie never got to set, a clock she never got to stop. She got up slowly, savoring the lack of urgency, and pulled on clothes that didn't match. Drew would have hated this outfit, would have told her she looked sloppy, unprofessional, like she wasn't trying. Perfect. She walked into Elena's small kitchen and accepted the coffee mug her sister handed her without asking how she took it. Elena knew. Elena had always known things about Sophie that Drew never bothered to learn. "You look different," Elena said, studying her sister's face across the kitchen table. "Different how?" "Rested, like you've been sleeping for the first time in years." Sophie sat at the small table and looked out at Elena's backyard. The grass was overgrown, wildflowers bloomed wherever they wanted, and a rusty bird bath sat tilted in the corner, full of rainwater and fallen leaves. It was chaos compared to the landscaped perfection Drew had insisted on at the penthouse. Perfect grass, perfect flowers, perfect stones arranged in perfect patterns. Elena's yard was beautiful in its wildness. "I need a job," Sophie said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Elena didn't ask if she was sure, didn't suggest couples counseling or reconciliation, didn't tell Sophie to think about it or sleep on it or give Drew another chance. She just nodded like Sophie had said the most obvious thing in the world. "You can work at the bookstore, it's not much money, but it's perfect." So Sophie started working at Elena's small independent bookstore in a neighborhood she'd never visited because Drew said it was too far from anything important. The store was cramped and smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. Regular customers came in every day, knew Elena by name, traded book recommendations like currency. They started learning Sophie's name too. Mrs. Chen came in every Thursday for mystery novels. She was 70-something, sharp as a blade, dressed in colors Drew would have called inappropriate for her age. "Give me something dark," Mrs. Chen said on Sophie's first day. "Murder, preferably. None of that love triangle nonsense. Life's too short for that garbage." Sophie laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. The sound felt foreign in her throat, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Mrs. Chen studied her with eyes that saw too much. "You look like someone who just escaped something?" Sophie's smile faded. "What makes you say that?" "I've seen that look before. My daughter had it when she left her husband 15 years ago. That I can finally breathe look." Mrs. Chen picked up 3 mysteries and headed to the counter. "Whatever you escaped from, good for you. Most women don't have the courage." Sophie rang up the purchase with hands that didn't shake anymore. "Maybe I just got tired of being afraid. That's usually when it happens." Mrs. Chen took her books and paused at the door. "Come back from fear. You're already halfway free." That night, alone in Elena's guest room, Sophie started writing in a journal Patricia had suggested. "Document everything," Patricia had said. "Your feelings, yes, but also facts. Build your case even in your own mind." But Sophie didn't write about court cases or legal strategy. She wrote a list. "Things Drew made me believe. I'm bad with money. I managed his entire household on my inheritance. I'm too emotional. I kept my composure while he raged. I'm too loud when I laugh. I should never have to apologize for joy. I talk too much. He never wanted to hear what I had to say. I'm not smart enough to understand his work. He never bothered to explain. I'm not interesting enough for his colleagues. He never introduced me properly. I'm too much and not enough at the same time. An impossible standard designed to keep me small. She read the list 3 times. Then she took a red pen and crossed out each line with hard, angry slashes until the page was covered in red like blood, like war wounds, like victory. Lies. All of it. 15 years of lies she'd swallowed like poison, letting them corrode her from the inside out. Her phone buzzed. Drew's attorney. Mrs. Gosling, my client is willing to negotiate a settlement that's fair to both parties. He's prepared to be generous if we can resolve this quickly and quietly. Sophie showed the message to Patricia, who smiled like a shark scenting blood in the water. Tell them we'll see them in court. And tell them to stop calling you Mrs. Gosling. That name won't be yours much longer. Sophie typed back, tell your client to check the house deed carefully. Tell him to review every document with my signature. Then we'll talk about what's fair. Until then, my attorney will handle all communication. Drew's attorney responded within 3 minutes. The house is in both names. Patricia sent a document Sophie had forgotten even existed. The down payment came entirely from Mrs. Wilde's inheritance, documented in this bank transfer from before the marriage. In this state, that makes it her separate property. Your client can keep his furniture if he'd like. That's all he's entitled to. No response for an hour. Then, my client requests mediation. Tell him no, Sophie said. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You sure? Mediation might get you more money faster. I don't want more money. I want what's mine. I want him to understand he doesn't get to negotiate his way out of consequences. Not this time. Patricia's smile widened. I like you, Sophie. This is going to be satisfying. The formal demand letter went out that afternoon. By evening, Drew's attorney had called Patricia 6 times. Patricia didn't answer until the 7th call. Sophie could hear the tinny voice through the phone. My client believes these demands are unreasonable and financially devastating. Tell your client I have documentation of every time he forged my client's signature, Patricia said, her voice cold and precise. Every joint account he drained without permission, every credit card he opened in her name. I have Monica Stalter's interview saved, printed and notarized. I have bank statements showing he spent his wife's inheritance money on hotels, restaurants and gifts for his mistress. Tell him if he wants to talk about what's unreasonable, we can do it in court, in front of a judge, in front of the media, or he can accept these terms and we can all move on with our lives. His choice. He has 48 hours to decide. The phone went silent. Sophie felt that unfamiliar sensation blooming in her chest again. The one she'd felt in the hotel room when she first contacted Patricia. Power. For the first time in 15 years, Sophie Wilde held power over her own life, over Drew's life, over what happened next. She could destroy him completely, have him disbarred, prosecuted, humiliated beyond repair. She could take everything and leave him with nothing, or she could take what was hers and walk away to build something new. She chose the second option, not because she was merciful, but because destroying Drew would mean thinking about him every day, and she was done giving Drew Gosling space in her mind. I want the house, the car, half his retirement accounts, and 5 years of spousal support at his former income, Sophie told Patricia. And I want full ownership of that Rolls-Royce, so I can do whatever I want with it. What are you going to do with a $30 million car? I have no idea, but it won't be what he wants. That's enough for now. Patricia grinned. You're going to be fine, Sophie. Better than fine. That night, Sophie went to bed early. She read one of Mrs. Chen's mystery novels, a detective who solved crimes everyone else gave up on. She fell asleep before finishing the 2nd chapter, the book open on her chest, and dreamed about coffee shops and a boy who'd once split $2 with her like it was treasure. When she woke up, her phone had a new message from Drew's attorney. My client accepts your terms. We'll proceed with drafting the separation agreement. Sophie read the message twice, waiting to feel triumphant. waiting to feel vindicated or satisfied or victorious. Instead, she felt nothing. Not emptiness exactly. More like neutrality. Like Drew Gosling had become a problem she'd solved and filed away in a drawer she'd never need to open again. She got up, made coffee, and went to work at the bookstore. Mrs. Chen was waiting at the counter with a knowing smile. "You look even more different today." "How so?" "Like you won something." Sophie thought about that. "Maybe I did." "Good," Mrs. Chen said. "The best revenge is becoming someone they can't touch anymore." Sophie smiled and realized Mrs. Chen was right. That's exactly what she was doing. Becoming someone Drew Gosling could never touch again. Someone free. Chapter 4. The Husband Who Learned What Power Costs. Drew Gosling lost his job on a Tuesday in January. The senior partners called it a mutual parting of ways for the good of the firm. Drew called it what it was: termination. They couldn't fire him for the affair. That wasn't technically illegal. They couldn't fire him for being a terrible husband. That wasn't against firm policy. But the forgery investigation gave them the cover they needed, and they took it without hesitation. By noon, his office was empty. By 2, his keycard was deactivated. By evening, his professional email bounced back with, "Mailbox does not exist." By the next morning, his name had been scrubbed from the firm website like he'd never existed at all. The gossip sites had picked up Monica's story and run with it. Disgraced lawyer loses 7-figure partnership after fraud allegations, Mistress tells all. Drew watched the story spread like wildfire across the internet. Monica had done more damage in one interview than Sophie could have done in a year of testimony. She'd positioned herself as the victim, the innocent woman manipulated by a calculating, heartless man. She'd cried on camera. She'd talked about how betrayed she felt, how used, how devastated. The internet believed every word. The comments were vicious and unanimous. Drew Gosling was a monster, and Monica Stalter was his victim. Drew wanted to scream that Monica had known exactly what she was doing, that she'd encouraged him to buy the car, that she'd laughed about Sophie, that she'd been anything but innocent. But nobody would believe him, and he had no proof except his own word, which was currently worth less than nothing. His friends stopped texting somewhere around the end of the first week. His college roommate blocked him after Drew asked to crash on his couch just for a few days. His former colleagues crossed the street when they saw him coming. His LinkedIn profile, once full of endorsements and congratulations, was now a graveyard of deleted connections. His father called once in February. The conversation lasted 45 seconds and carved out pieces of Drew's chest. "You forged your wife's signature." "Dad, let me explain the circumstances." "You forged your wife's signature. A man who does that isn't a man. He's a criminal pretending to be civilized. He's worse than a criminal. He's a coward who betrayed the one person who trusted him most. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You made dozens of choices. You chose to lie, to cheat, to forge, to betray. Those weren't mistakes, Drew. Mistakes are accidents. What you did was deliberate." His father's voice cracked with something that might have been grief. "Don't call me again until you've fixed what you broke. If you can fix it, I have my doubts you're capable." The line went dead. Drew sat in the empty penthouse, soon to be Sophie's penthouse once the divorce finalized, and listened to the silence. His mother sent a text an hour later. "Your grandmother is removing you from her will. She said she won't reward a man who treats women like property. She's ashamed of you. We all are." Drew stared at that message until his eyes blurred. His grandmother Ruth had been his favorite person. She'd taught him to play chess on summer afternoons. She'd told him stories about surviving the Depression. She'd slipped him $20 bills when his parents weren't looking. She'd been at his wedding, had danced with Sophie, had told Drew he'd married up and better not forget it. He'd forgotten it. He'd forgotten everything that mattered. He called his grandmother. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail that came out pleading and pathetic. "Grandma, please. I need to talk to you. I need to explain." She never called back. The penthouse lease came up for renewal in March. Drew went to sign the paperwork, assuming it was a formality. The landlord, a woman in her 50s who'd always been friendly, looked at him with something between pity and contempt. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gosling, without both signatures I can't renew the lease. Your wife, your ex-wife, has blocked the renewal." "This is my home. I've lived here for 6 years. Actually, sir, according to our records, your wife paid the security deposit and the first 3 months' rent from her personal account. So technically, it was her home. You just lived there." Drew felt the floor tilt beneath him. "I need time to find somewhere else. You have until the end of the month. I'm sorry, but those are the terms of the lease. Both parties must agree to renewal. Ms. Wilde has declined." Drew moved out 2 weeks later, not to another luxury penthouse, not even to a decent apartment. His credit cards had been declining for weeks. He'd been living off joint accounts that Sophie had frozen. His personal accounts had maybe $4,000 left. He moved into an extended stay hotel that smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner. 1 room, 1 bed, 1 window overlooking a parking lot where people came and went without ever looking up. He'd gone from a penthouse with a view of the city to a box with a view of nothing. His car got repossessed in April. Another thing he'd financed with joint credit. Another thing Sophie's attorneys had flagged. The repo man was polite but firm. "Sorry, man, just doing my job." Drew took the bus to his new job, the one he'd found after 3 months of searching, contract paralegal work for a solo practitioner who paid him $25 an hour. He'd been making $500,000 a year at the firm. Now he was making around $4,000 a month if he was lucky. It wasn't enough to cover rent, food, and utilities. It definitely wasn't enough to pay the spousal support the court would eventually order. Drew was drowning in slow motion, and there was no one to grab onto. One day in May, he saw Sophie's court testimony online. Someone had recorded it, posted it on social media with the caption, "Woman destroys cheating husband in court. Watch her take everything." Drew watched it 17 times. Sophie wore red, the color he'd always hated on her because it was too loud, too attention-seeking. She was radiant in it, confident, strong. The woman on that witness stand bore no resemblance to the wife he'd left behind on Christmas morning. She sat calmly and answered every question with precision. No tears, no dramatics, just facts delivered like surgical strikes. "Did your husband have your permission to forge your signature on loan documents?" "No, I didn't know about the loan until Christmas morning." "Did you know he was purchasing a $30 million vehicle?" "Not until I saw it in our driveway with another woman behind the wheel." "Did you know about his relationship with Monica Stalter?" "I suspected for months. He confirmed it when he bought her a Rolls-Royce and gave me a piggy bank with $2 inside." The courtroom had gasped. Drew hadn't been there. His attorney had told him to stay home, that his presence would only hurt his case. Now Drew understood why. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. Sophie got the house, the Rolls-Royce, half of Drew's retirement accounts. 5 years of spousal support calculated at his former income, not his current salary. "Mr. Gosling committed fraud against his wife," the judge said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "He used her financial credibility and her inheritance to fund an extramarital affair. Mrs. Wilde is entitled to full compensation for that betrayal and to damages for emotional distress. This court finds in her favor on all counts. Mr. Gosling should consider himself fortunate he's not facing criminal charges." Drew's attorney had tried to argue. The judge shut him down with one look. After the video ended, Drew sat in his hotel room and did the math. 5 years of spousal support at his old salary would cost him over $2 million. Money he didn't have. Money he'd never have again. He'd have to sell everything. His watch, his furniture, his grandmother's chess set if she'd let him keep it. Everything. His phone buzzed. A mutual acquaintance. "Drew, you need to see this." A news article. "Scorned wife donates Rolls-Royce sale to women's shelter, all $30 million. Drew read the article 3 times, each time hoping he'd misread something. Sophie had sold the Rolls-Royce. Every penny, all $30 million, donated to a non-profit that helped women escape domestic violence and rebuild their lives. She hadn't kept a cent. The article included a quote from Sophie at the donation ceremony. "This car represented everything wrong with my marriage. I wanted it to represent something right instead. These women deserve a fresh start. So do I. Money that was meant to buy silence and compliance should instead buy freedom and dignity. Drew's phone rang, his attorney, voice tight with disbelief. Did you see the news? Yeah, Drew, that money could have cleared your debts. She could have split it with you as part of the settlement. She could have kept it. Why would she just give it all away? Because she doesn't need it, Drew said quietly, his voice hollow. She never needed the money, John. She needed to be free, and $30 million was a small price to pay for that. He hung up and stared at the article. At Sophie's photo, she was smiling, standing outside the women's shelter with the director, holding an oversized check while women and children stood behind her clapping. She looked happy. Drew realized with a clarity that felt like drowning in ice water that he'd never made Sophie look that happy. Not once in 15 years, not on their wedding day, not on their anniversary, not ever. He'd made her look tired, anxious, small, worried, tense, never happy. He picked up the plastic piggy bank he'd kept. He didn't know why he'd kept it anymore, didn't understand the impulse that made him carry it from the penthouse to this hotel room. He shook it. The $2 rattled inside like dying promises. He opened it and found the receipt from their first date. 20 years old, faded almost to transparency, evidence of a time when Sophie Wilde had looked at him like he was worth something. Drew put his head in his hands and cried for the first time since his father had stopped speaking to him. He cried for what he'd destroyed, for who he'd become, for the woman who'd loved him when he had nothing, who he'd repaid by giving her nothing that mattered. When he was done crying, he was still alone in a hotel room with a plastic piggy bank and $2 that would never be enough for anything. But something had shifted in him. Something small, but real. For the first time since Christmas morning, Drew Gosling looked at himself clearly in the cracked hotel mirror, and he didn't recognize the man looking back. That was either the end of everything or the beginning of something new. He didn't know which yet. Chapter 5. The Woman Who Discovered Her Voice. 6 months after Christmas, Sophie stood outside the courthouse in a red dress, the same red dress she'd worn to testify, and felt the sun on her face like a blessing. The divorce was finalized. The judge had signed the papers that morning. She was no longer Mrs. Drew Gosling, no longer tethered to a man who'd spent 15 years making her smaller so he could feel bigger. She was Sophie Wilde again, the name she'd been born with, the name she'd given up thinking it was romantic, thinking it meant they were truly one person instead of two people drowning each other. She'd been Sophie Gosling for 15 years. It had taken 6 months to erase it from every document, every account, every piece of paper that said she belonged to someone else. Patricia stood beside her on the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand, victory radiating from her like heat. You did it. We did it, Sophie corrected, but Patricia shook her head. No, you did this. I just filed the paperwork and made some phone calls. You're the one who walked away. You're the one who stood up in court and told the truth. You're the one who turned a $30 million insult into a gift for women who needed it. That was all you, Sophie. Patricia squeezed her shoulder. Now go celebrate. You've earned it. Sophie walked to the parking lot where her car, still the same Honda because she didn't need anything flashier, was waiting. Reporters had gathered, not many, but enough to make Sophie pause. A young woman shoved a microphone toward her. Mrs. Gosling. Ms. Wilde, Sophie corrected firmly. I'm not Mrs. Gosling anymore. Ms. Wilde, how do you feel about your ex-husband's current financial situation? Some people are saying the settlement was too harsh, that 5 years of spousal support will bankrupt him. Do you think that's fair? Sophie thought about Drew living in an extended stay hotel, working for hourly wages, taking the bus, stripped of everything he'd used to define himself, the money, the status, the power. She thought about the 15 years she'd spent making herself smaller, quieter, less, so he could be more. I think we're even, she said simply. Do you have any message for women going through similar situations? Your story has resonated with millions. Sophie looked directly at the camera. Yes, You're not a supporting character in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. So pick up the pen and write yourself free. It's terrifying. It's hard, but it's worth it. The clip went viral within hours. By evening, Sophie's face was everywhere. News sites, social media, morning shows. Companies started reaching out. Motivational speaking tours, podcast interviews, book deals, sponsorship opportunities. Sophie ignored all of it. She didn't want to monetize her pain. She didn't want to become the woman who left her husband as a brand, as a career, as an identity. She wanted to become herself. She went back to work at the bookstore the next morning like nothing had changed. Mrs. Chen was waiting at the counter, a knowing smile on her face. "Congratulations on your divorce," Mrs. Chen said cheerfully. "That's not usually something people congratulate. It is when the marriage was a prison and you just got paroled for good behavior." Mrs. Chen slid a book across the counter. "Read this. It's about women who reinvent themselves after losing everything." Sophie looked at the title. Women Who Run with the Wolves. "I didn't lose everything," Sophie said. "I gained myself back." "I know. That's exactly why you need to read it." Sophie took the book home to Elena's guest room, the room that was starting to feel more like home than the penthouse ever had. She read it in one sitting, curled up under blankets that smelled like Elena's lavender detergent instead of Drew's expensive cologne. The book talked about women reclaiming their wildness, their intuition, their power. It talked about how women were taught from birth to be tame, to shrink, to apologize for taking up space, for being loud, for wanting things. Sophie thought about all the times Drew had told her to quiet down, to smile less, to not embarrass him, to be more appropriate, more professional, more like the wives his colleagues had. Silent, decorative, convenient. She thought about how she'd listened, how she'd believed him. The next day, she quit the bookstore. Elena wasn't surprised. "What's next?" her sister asked, no judgment in her voice, only curiosity. "I'm going back to teaching." "You sure? Drew made you quit, which is exactly why I need to go back." Sophie smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I was a good teacher. I forgot that. He made me forget that. Time to remember." She applied to schools. Most wanted full-time teachers with current certifications. Sophie found something better, a non-profit that provided free tutoring for underprivileged kids whose schools had failed them. The pay was terrible. The hours were flexible. The kids were brilliant and broken and hungry for someone to believe in them. Her first student was Jade, the quiet girl from the bookstore who'd bought books about brave women. "You teach now?" Jade asked, surprised to see Sophie in the small non-profit office. "Looks like it." Jade was failing English, not because she wasn't smart, but because her father told her every day that she wasn't college material, that girls like her didn't need education. "Why would I go to college?" Jade repeated what she'd been told so many times she believed it. "Girls like me don't need degrees. My dad says I should just find a husband and have kids. That's what women do." "Girls like you?" Sophie asked carefully. "Poor girls. Girls whose dads work construction and drink too much. Girls who aren't special. Girls who don't matter." Sophie sat down across from Jade at the scarred table. "I'm going to tell you something my husband used to tell me every single day. He said I wasn't smart enough to understand his work, that I was too emotional to make good decisions, that I should let him handle all the important things because I'd just mess them up. I believed him for 15 years. Sophie paused, meeting Jade's eyes. "Do you know what happened when I finally stopped believing him?" "What?" "I took everything he had and walked away because I was smart enough, strong enough, brave enough, and so are you." Jade stared at her. "Did he try to stop you?" "He couldn't, because by the time he realized I was done, I'd already won." "How did you win?" "I stopped letting him define me. I started defining myself." Jade came back twice a week after that. She brought her English homework, her math problems, her college application essays she was writing in secret. Sophie helped her craft an essay about women who changed the world by refusing to stay small. Jade chose Sophie as her subject. "I can't write about you," Sophie protested. "I'm your tutor, not some hero." "You're more than that," Jade interrupted, fierce and certain. "You showed me I could leave, that I didn't have to believe what my dad says about me, that I could be more than what he thinks I deserve." "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did. You believed you were worth saving. And then you saved yourself." Jade showed Sophie her essay. The opening line: "The bravest thing a woman can do is believe she's worth more than the life she's been given." Sophie read the entire essay with tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she pulled Jade into a hug that the girl desperately needed. "This is beautiful, Jade. This is going to get you into college." "It's true. You proved it." That night, Sophie drove past the penthouse one last time. She hadn't been back since she'd packed her things 6 months ago. The building looked the same, tall, expensive, full of people living expensive lives. The lights in her old unit were off. A "for lease" sign hung in the window. Drew was gone, erased, like he'd never been there at all. Sophie felt nothing looking at it. No anger, no sadness, no nostalgia for what might have been. That was how she knew she was truly free. She drove home, to Elena's house that was now just as much her home, and sat at the kitchen table with tea in one of her ridiculous mismatched teacups. The ones Drew had hated, the ones he'd called clutter. They weren't clutter, they were joy. Her phone buzzed. Patricia. The Rolls-Royce sale went through. The women's shelter got the full amount. "They're naming their new building after you." Sophie smiled. "Tell them to name it after the women who live there, not after me." They said they'd compromise. The Sophie Wilde Freedom Center. Final offer. Sophie laughed. "Fine. I can live with that." She put her phone down and stared out at Elena's wild backyard, where flowers grew wherever they wanted and grass didn't follow any rules. Somewhere out there, Drew existed. She didn't know where, didn't know if he was okay, didn't care mostly. Sometimes she wondered if he'd learned anything, if he'd changed, if he regretted. But those thoughts were fleeting, gone as quickly as they came, like smoke on wind. Sophie's life was full without Drew in it, full of students who needed her, full of laughter with Elena, full of freedom and choice and possibility, full of herself. And that was enough, more than enough. Chapter 6. The man who finally broke Drew sat in a laundromat at 2 in the morning because the hotel's machines were broken and he had to be at work by 7. He watched his clothes tumble in a machine that smelled like bleach and decades of other people's desperation. Around him, the only other occupants were a mother with 2 kids asleep on her lap, an old man reading a newspaper from 3 days ago, and a teenager scrolling through a phone with a cracked screen. Normal people, living normal lives, struggling but surviving. Drew had never felt more invisible, or more visible. He couldn't tell which. His phone buzzed. Not his attorney anymore. Drew couldn't afford an attorney. It was his mother. He almost didn't answer. "Your grandmother passed away last night." Drew's chest went hollow. The laundromat sounds faded to white noise. "What?" "Heart attack in her sleep. The doctor said it was quick. Peaceful." His mother's voice was flat, drained of the warmth she used to have for him, back when he was someone she could be proud of. "The funeral is Saturday. You can come if you want. But your father doesn't want to see you. Neither do most of the family. So maybe stay in the back." "Mum, I'll send you the details." She hung up without saying goodbye. Drew sat in the laundromat and stared at his phone. Grandma Ruth was gone. The woman who taught him how to be a man, a real man, not the counterfeit version he'd become, was gone. And she died thinking he was a failure. Died ashamed of him. The funeral was small, family only. Drew stood in the very back of the church, wearing a suit he'd bought at a thrift store because his tailored suits had been sold months ago to pay rent. His father didn't acknowledge him. His mother gave him a brief, cold hug that felt like an obligation. His cousins avoided eye contact, like he carried some contagious disease. He was a ghost at his own grandmother's funeral. After the service, the family gathered at his parents' house for food and memories. Drew wasn't invited, but he went anyway. He stood in the kitchen where he'd eaten Sunday dinners as a child, listening to relatives tell stories about Ruth's strength, her wisdom, her kindness. His uncle found him there. "You've got nerve showing up here." "She was my grandmother. She was ashamed of you." His uncle's voice was low, venomous, full of years of accumulated judgment. "She told me before she died, when she was still lucid. She said you broke the only real thing you ever had. She said Sophie was the best thing that ever happened to you, and you threw her away for a woman who didn't even pretend to love you back." Drew's throat closed. "I know." "Then why are you here? You don't get to grieve. You lost that right when you forged your wife's signature and humiliated her in front of everyone. You lost that right when you chose ego over love. You lost that right when you became someone none of us recognize." His uncle walked away. Drew left the house 5 minutes later. He sat in his borrowed car, borrowed from a co-worker who pitied him enough to help, and opened the envelope his mother had given him. Ruth's will. She'd left him nothing. Every penny went to charities she'd supported her whole life. Except for one bequest, $200,000 to Sophie Wilde, with a handwritten letter attached. Drew unfolded the letter with shaking hands. "Drew, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably wondering why I cut you out completely. Here's why. You forgot where you came from. You forgot that success without character is just noise. You forgot that the people who love you aren't there to applaud. They're there to keep you human when the world tries to make you a monster. Sophie kept you human, and you destroyed her for it. I'm leaving everything to charity because I don't want you to inherit anything you didn't earn through real character, real change. But I am leaving Sophie money. Not because she needs it, she'll be fine without it, but because she deserves to know someone saw her value when you didn't. Someone recognized what you threw away. If you want my forgiveness, earn it. Not with words. Words are cheap, and you've always been good with them. Earn it with change. Real, lasting, painful change. Become the man I thought you were when you were 20, the man Sophie thought you were when she said yes, the man you were before you decided being powerful was more important than being good. I loved you, Drew. Past tense. I loved who you were. I don't know who you are now, and I died not wanting to find out. Prove me wrong, if you can. Grandma Ruth. Drew read the letter 5 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his wallet next to the receipt from the $2 coffee. Evidence of who he'd been. Evidence of who he'd become. Evidence of the distance between the two. He drove back to the hotel. He sat on the bed that smelled like cigarette smoke from the previous tenant and stared at the wall until the sun came up. For months, he'd been waiting for rock bottom, waiting for the moment when things couldn't get worse, when the only direction was up. This was it. His grandmother was dead. His father wouldn't speak to him. Sophie had moved on completely. He was alone in a hotel room with a letter telling him he'd failed at being human. He could spiral. He could drink until he forgot. He could blame Sophie, blame Monica, blame the universe for being unfair. Or he could do what Ruth's letter said, change. Not fake change, not surface change designed to win people back. Real change that hurt. That took years. That might not even matter in the end. Drew opened his laptop and searched for therapists who worked on sliding scale fees. He couldn't afford much, but he needed help. Real help. Not to win Sophie back. That ship had sailed and sunk. But because he genuinely didn't understand how he'd become this person, and he needed to figure it out before he destroyed anything else. He made an appointment for the following week with Dr. Sarah Lynn, whose website said she specialized in men recovering from their own worst choices. That was him. That was exactly him. Then he went to a community center and asked about volunteer opportunities. They needed help at a food bank on weekends, sorting donations, packing boxes, handing out meals to people who looked at him with gratitude he absolutely didn't deserve. "I'm not very good at this kind of thing," Drew admitted to the coordinator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s. She smiled. "Nobody is at first. You'll learn, or you won't. Either way, the work needs doing. Drew showed up on Saturday. He sorted cans, packed boxes, loaded them into cars. An older man with weathered hands and kind eyes asked him, "You running from something?" "How do you know?" "Everyone who volunteers here is running from something. The smart ones eventually start running towards something instead. The dumb ones just keep running in circles until they collapse." Drew thought about that while he worked. Running from something, that's all he'd done since Christmas. Running from guilt, from consequences, from the man he'd become. Maybe it was time to run towards something, even if he didn't know what that something was yet. He started reading books Sophie had loved. Not to understand her, it was too late for that, but because he realized with shame that he'd never bothered to ask what she loved. He'd never cared about her interior life, her thoughts, her dreams. He read fiction and poetry and memoirs. He read about people who'd survived worse and come out better. He read until his eyes hurt and his heart hurt worse. He started cooking, real cooking, not ordering takeout or heating frozen meals, following recipes, failing, trying again, learning patience he'd never had to learn before. He started journaling like Dr. Lin suggested. Write what you're feeling. Don't edit yourself. Don't try to sound smart or insightful. Just write the truth, however ugly it is. Drew wrote, "I treated Sophie like furniture, like she existed to make me comfortable. I never asked about her dreams. I never noticed when she stopped laughing. I never saw her as a person with her own wants and needs, just as my wife, an accessory to my life. And when she left, I didn't grieve losing her. I grieved losing control." He wrote pages and pages, admitting things he'd never admitted even to himself. "I don't know if I loved Sophie, or if I loved having her. I don't know if I'm capable of real love. I don't know who I am without power and status. I don't know how to be small and quiet and ordinary, but I'm learning. Every day. It's humbling, it's painful, it's necessary." Months passed. Summer turned to fall. Drew kept volunteering, kept going to therapy every week, kept reading, cooking, writing, trying to become someone new. He didn't contact Sophie, didn't ask mutual friends about her, didn't look at her social media or drive past her sister's house. Not because he'd moved on, he hadn't, but because Sophie deserved to move on without him lurking in the shadows of her new life. One day in November, a co-worker mentioned seeing Sophie at a charity event. "She looked good, man. Really good. Happy. She was there with some guy, architect or something. Seemed nice." Drew felt the pain like a physical blow, but he nodded and kept his voice steady. "Good for her. She deserves to be happy." The co-worker looked surprised. "You're not mad?" "Why would I be mad? She deserves better than I ever gave her. If she found it, then at least one of us won." "That's actually pretty mature." Drew smiled bitterly. "I'm learning. About 15 years too late, but I'm learning." That night he wrote in his journal, "Sophie is with someone new. I hope he's everything I wasn't. I hope he sees her, really sees her. I hope he makes her laugh the way she used to laugh before I killed that in her. I hope she never thinks about me except as a cautionary tale. That would be the greatest gift I could give her, my complete absence from her happiness." He meant every word, and meaning it felt like the first truly unselfish thing he'd done in years, the first step toward becoming someone worthy of the man Ruth had wanted him to be, even if it was too late for Sophie, even if it was too late for anyone. At least it wasn't too late for himself. Chapter 7. The Woman Who Built a New Life. Sophie opened the doors to Wildflower Learning Center and watched students file in. 15 kids this morning, ages 8 to 17, all from families who couldn't afford tutoring, all told by someone that they weren't smart enough or good enough or worth investing in. This was her classroom now. Not a borrowed space in Elena's bookstore or a corner of a non-profit office. This was hers. A real building with real classrooms and real resources. The inheritance from Grandma Ruth had made it possible. Sophie had cried when Patricia called with the news. "Ruth Gosling left you $200,000 with a note for the woman who deserved better than my grandson. Build something beautiful." She also included a letter. Sophie had read Ruth's letter 5 times, each time feeling the weight of that woman's regret and love. "My dear Sophie, I failed you. I saw who Drew was becoming and I said nothing. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I was wrong. You were the granddaughter I always wanted. You had light in you, real, genuine light. Drew dimmed it year by year, and I watched it happen without intervening. That shame is mine to carry. I'm leaving you money not because you need it, you're stronger than you know, but because I want you to build something that matters, something that reflects who you really are. Drew will get his own letter. I told him to become worthy of the man you once loved. I don't know if he can, but I hope you're kind enough to acknowledge it if he does. Not for him, for yourself. Because holding on to anger poisons the holder, not the target. Build something beautiful, Sophie. You already are something beautiful. With love and regret, Ruth." Sophie had used the money to lease a building, hire teachers, buy supplies. She'd called it Wildflower Learning Center because Eleanor had said, "Wildflowers don't follow rules. They just grow anyway wherever they want." That's what these kids were, wildflowers growing in concrete, refusing to be crushed. Jade was thriving now, taking AP classes, writing college essays that made Sophie cry with pride, applying to schools across the country. Another student, Marcus, brilliant with numbers, told by a teacher he'd never be smart enough for college, was doing calculus problems for fun and talking about studying engineering. "Ms. Sophie," Marcus asked one day, "why do adults tell kids they're stupid?" Sophie knelt down next to his desk. "Because someone told them they were stupid once and they believed it, so they pass it on like a disease. Like if they're small, everyone else has to be small too." "Did someone tell you that?" "My ex-husband, for 15 years. Marcus processed this. "But you didn't believe him forever?" "No. Eventually I realized he was wrong." "How?" "I walked away and became someone he couldn't touch anymore, someone he couldn't make small. That's when I knew he'd been lying the whole time." Marcus nodded seriously. "You're really smart, Miss Sophie, probably smarter than him." Sophie laughed and ruffled his hair. "Thanks, Marcus." Teaching filled her days with purpose. Her nights were her own now. She'd moved into her own apartment, decorated it exactly how she wanted with mismatched furniture and books everywhere, and those ridiculous teacups Drew had hated. She took a pottery class, went to concerts alone, traveled to Paris and stood in front of the Mona Lisa crying. Not because the painting was beautiful, but because she'd made it here, alone, free, whole. A man approached her in the Louvre. American accent, kind eyes, salt and pepper hair. "First time in Paris?" "Yes. Is it that obvious? You've got that look, like you can't believe you're really here." They talked for an hour about art and travel and reinvention. His name was David. He was an architect, divorced, 2 kids back in Seattle, taking a sabbatical to remember who I am outside of work. Sophie understood that completely. They had coffee, then dinner. Then he asked for her number. "I fly home tomorrow," David said, "but I'd like to call you when I get back, if that's okay." Sophie hesitated. She wasn't ready, wasn't sure she'd ever be ready to trust someone again. But David's eyes were genuinely kind. His questions were real. He listened when she spoke. He didn't interrupt or correct or try to fix her. "Okay," Sophie said. David called when he got home. They talked for hours. He told her about his divorce, his kids, his realization that he'd prioritized career over family until his family was gone. "I don't want to make that mistake again," David said. "What do you want instead?" "To be present, to really listen, to actually see people instead of just assuming they'll always be there." Sophie liked him, but she didn't love him. Maybe she'd never love anyone again. Drew had broken something in her, not her ability to love, but her willingness to risk it. "I need to be honest with you," Sophie said one night. "I'm not looking for anything serious. I just got out of a marriage that almost destroyed me. I'm still putting myself back together." "I respect that completely," David said without hesitation. Can we just be friends who talk sometimes? No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who enjoy each other's company. I'd like that. So they became friends. Long phone calls. Occasional visits when David's architecture work brought him near her city. No pressure, no demands, just easy companionship. Elena asked one day, "Do you like him?" "I do." "But you don't love him?" "No, not like that." "Are you ever going to love anyone again?" Sophie thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe. But only if I want to, not because I need to, not because someone makes me feel like I should, only if it feels right, if it feels safe, if it feels like adding to my life instead of subtracting from myself. That's very healthy. Is it? Or am I just scared? Can't it be both?" Sophie laughed. "When did you get so wise?" "When I watched my baby sister walk away from a man who was destroying her and rebuild herself into someone magnificent. That was wisdom, Sophie. Everything after is just practice." The center thrived. Students came from all over the city. Parents thanked Sophie with tears and gratitude. "My daughter believes in herself now," one mother said, gripping Sophie's hands. "She used to hide in her room, afraid to speak up. Now she's applying to college. She wants to be an engineer. Thank you. Thank you for seeing her when everyone else just saw a failure." Sophie didn't know how to accept gratitude like that. She'd spent 15 years being told she wasn't enough. Now people were telling her she was everything. Mrs. Chen came to visit the center. She walked through the classrooms, watched Sophie teach, observed students working with fierce concentration. "I'm proud of you," Mrs. Chen said. "You don't really know me." "I know enough. You escaped. You built something real. You're helping kids escape their own prisons. That's more than most people do with their freedom." Sophie gave Mrs. Chen a tour of the whole building. The old woman smiled at the books, the bright walls, the kids bent over homework like it mattered. "This is what $30 million should buy," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Not a car. This. I didn't use that money for this. I know, but that money led here. You turned poison into medicine, Sophie. That's alchemy." That night, Sophie sat in her apartment, her own space, decorated exactly how she wanted, and made tea in one of those ridiculous teacups. She sipped slowly and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Drew existed. She didn't know where, didn't know if he was okay, didn't care mostly. Sometimes she wondered if he'd changed, if he'd learned anything, if he felt even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But those thoughts were fleeting, gone as quickly as they came. Sophie's life was full without him, full of students who needed her, full of laughter with Elena, full of quiet conversations with David, full of freedom and choice and possibility, full of herself. She pulled out her journal and wrote, "Today Marcus asked me if I believe in second chances. I told him I believe in first chances, the chance you give yourself to start over. That's the only second chance that matters, the one you give yourself when you finally realize you deserve better." She closed the journal and finished her tea. Tomorrow she'd teach. She'd laugh with Jade. She'd help Marcus with calculus. She'd live her life. And Drew Gosling wouldn't be in it at all. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the house, not the revenge. The victory was forgetting he existed. Until the day he reminded her. Chapter 8. The Husband Who Found Humility. 2 years after Christmas, Drew Gosling stood in the food bank and handed a box of canned goods to a woman who reminded him of his mother before she'd stopped looking at him with love. "Thank you, dear," the woman said, her eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "You're welcome." She studied his face for a long moment. "You've got kind eyes." Sad but kind. Drew almost laughed. Kind eyes. If she only knew what those eyes had witnessed, what choices they'd watched him make without blinking. But maybe she did know. Maybe everyone at the food bank was running from their own history. Maybe they all had ghosts chasing them. Drew had been volunteering here for over a year now, every weekend. sometimes weekdays when his paralegal work was slow. Not for community service hours, those didn't exist for him anymore. Not for his resume, that was permanently destroyed, just because he had nothing else and nowhere else to be. His therapist, Dr. Lin, had asked him months ago, "Why do you keep coming back to the food bank?" "Because these people don't know who I used to be. They don't know about the fraud or the affair or any of it. They just see some guy sorting cans and packing boxes. It's the only place I feel human instead of like a cautionary tale." "Do you feel human anywhere else?" "No, not really." That was brutally honest. Drew didn't feel human most days. He felt like a shell going through motions: work, therapy, volunteering, sleep, repeat. An existence that felt more like penance than life. He'd stopped drinking completely, stopped chasing any kind of distraction, stopped pretending he'd ever be the man he was before Christmas. That man was dead. Drew was something new now, something smaller, something quieter, something that didn't take up much space. A man named James started volunteering alongside Drew one Saturday in October. James was maybe 60, with hands that shook slightly when he lifted boxes and eyes that had seen too much. "You former military?" Drew asked while they sorted donations. "Nah, just got old and made too many mistakes." James smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You running from something?" Everyone asked that eventually. "Does it show?" "Everyone here's running from something. The smart ones eventually stop running. The dumb ones run until they die." James paused. "I'm trying to be smart, finally, at 63 years old." "What are you running from?" "A wife I lost to my temper, kids who won't speak to me, 50 years of being angry at the world for not giving me what I thought I deserved." James lifted another box, hands shaking. "Took me until my grandkids were born to realize I didn't deserve anything. You earn it or you don't." They worked in silence for a while. Then Drew asked, "What if you can't earn it back?" James looked at him with surprising clarity. "Then you earn something new. You become someone new, not for them, for yourself, because living as the person who destroyed everything is worse than dying." Drew went home and wrote in his journal, "James said you become someone new, not for the people you hurt, but for yourself. I'm trying, but I don't know who I'm becoming. I just know I can't be who I was." That person destroyed everything real in his life because he thought power was more important than love. He'd been writing like this for over a year now. Pages and pages of honesty that no one would ever read. Dr. Lin said it was healthy. Drew thought it was pathetic, but he kept doing it anyway because what else was there? He read constantly now. Sophie's favorite books that he'd never bothered with before. Novels about people finding redemption. Memoirs about people surviving their own worst choices. Poetry that made him feel things he'd buried for decades. One novel destroyed him. A story about a woman who left her husband and rebuilt her life from nothing. The husband in the book never changed, never grew, just stayed angry and bitter until he died alone in a house full of things that didn't matter. Drew closed the book and sat in the dark hotel room he still lived in. Was that his future? Dying alone? Unchanged? He didn't want that, but wanting to change and actually changing were different things entirely. His mother called in November. "Your father wants to talk to you." Drew's heart stuttered. "He does. Don't get your hopes up. He's not offering forgiveness. But he's old, Drew. We both are. And he doesn't want to die without saying what needs to be said. He owes you that much. Maybe you owe him that much too." Drew drove to his parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. His father sat in the living room, looking smaller than Drew remembered. Older, fragile in a way that scared Drew more than anger ever had. "Dad, sit." Drew sat on the couch he'd sat on 1,000 times growing up. His father didn't speak for a long time. Finally, "Your grandmother's letter said you could change. I told your mother I didn't believe that, but she insisted I give you a chance to prove me wrong." "I don't need your forgiveness," Drew started. "I'm not offering it." His father's voice was hard still, but tired underneath. "I'm offering you a question, A real question that requires a real answer. Do you understand what you did wrong? Not in theory, not in your head, in your bones. Do you understand? Yes. Tell me. Drew took a breath. This was it. The moment he'd been preparing for without knowing it. I treated Sophie like property, like something I owned instead of someone I loved. I made her small so I could feel big. I destroyed her confidence, her joy, her sense of self. And I did it all without thinking, without caring, because I never saw her as a person with her own dreams and needs, just as my wife, just as an accessory to my life. His father's expression didn't change. And Monica? A symptom, not the disease. The disease was me, who I chose to be, what I valued. What did you value? Power, status, being seen as successful, being envied. Drew's voice cracked. I valued everything that doesn't matter and destroyed the only thing that did. His father nodded slowly. You've changed. I'm trying to. Trying isn't enough, Drew. It never is. I know. They sat in silence. Then his father said, Your mother and I won't be around much longer. Maybe 5 years. Maybe less. If you want any kind of relationship with us before we're gone, you'll need to prove you've changed. Not with words, with time, with consistency, with becoming someone we can be proud of again. I will. His father studied him. We'll see. Time will tell. It always does. Drew left feeling hollowed out. Not forgiven, not rejected, just acknowledged, seen. Maybe for the first time in years. It was something. Not much, but something. That night he wrote, Dad said trying isn't enough. He's right. I've been trying to feel different, but feeling different isn't being different. I need to do different, be different, every single day, for years, maybe forever. Maybe that's what real change is. Not a moment of revelation, but a million small moments of choosing differently. Winter came. Drew kept volunteering, kept going to therapy, kept reading, cooking, writing, kept trying to become someone new. He heard through a mutual acquaintance that Sophie had opened a learning center for kids, that it was thriving, that she was happy. He wanted to see it, to see what she'd built, to see proof that she was okay. But he didn't go, because Sophie deserved a life completely free of him, even as a curiosity, even as a ghost, even as someone who meant well. He wrote in his journal instead, Sophie built something beautiful. I hope she never thinks of me except as a lesson learned. I hope I'm just a story she tells to teach other women what to walk away from. That would be the greatest gift I could give her, becoming a cautionary tale that helps others escape. He meant every word, and meaning it felt like growth, small, painful, real growth. The kind that might actually matter someday, even if it was too late for Sophie, even if it was too late for his family, at least it wasn't too late for himself. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. Sophie received the letter on a Tuesday in spring, 3 years after Christmas. It arrived in a cream envelope, her name written in careful handwriting she didn't recognize at first, no return address, just a postmark from her old neighborhood. She opened it at her kitchen table, tea cooling beside her, late afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Dear Sophie, I'm writing this because I'm out of time and out of courage, and you deserve to know the truth before I'm gone. I'm Ruth, Drew's grandmother. You probably remember me from your wedding, though I doubt you think about me much anymore. I don't blame you. I'm dying. The doctors say I have weeks, maybe less. I'm not writing for sympathy. I'm writing because I failed you in ways I can't fix now. I saw who Drew was becoming. I saw how he treated you, like scenery, like staff, like something he owned instead of someone he loved. I said nothing. I thought it wasn't my place. I thought you were strong enough to leave if it got bad enough. I was wrong to stay silent. You were the granddaughter I always wanted. You had real light in you. Drew dimmed it year by year, and I watched it happen without intervening. That shame is mine to carry. I'm leaving you money in my will, Not because you need it, you're clearly stronger than any of us knew, but because I want you to know I saw you, I valued you, and I'm sorrier than words can express that I didn't say that when it would have mattered. Drew will read his own letter after I'm gone. I told him to become the man you thought you were marrying. I don't know if he can. People rarely change that fundamentally, but I hope he tries. For his own sake, not for yours. You owe him nothing, Sophie. Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. Not even a thought. You owe him absolutely nothing. But if he ever does earn redemption, and I mean really earn it over years of consistent change, not just words and apologies, I hope you're kind enough to acknowledge it. Not for him, for yourself. Because holding on to anger for years poisons the holder, not the target. Build something beautiful, Sophie. You already are something beautiful. I just wish I'd told you that when I had the chance. With love and profound regret, Ruth. Sophie read the letter 3 times, tea forgotten and cold. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a box with all the other evidence of her old life. The receipt from the $2 coffee, the court documents, the news articles, the piggy bank, artifacts of a life she'd survived and moved beyond. That night, Eleanor found her sitting in the dark kitchen, staring at nothing. What happened? Grandma Ruth died. 3 years ago, apparently. She left me this. Sophie handed her sister the letter. Elena read it, then set it down gently. She was right. You don't owe him anything. I know. But nothing. There's no but. I wish she'd told me this while she was alive. I could have told her it wasn't her job to save me, that I saved myself, that I don't blame her. Would it have changed anything? Sophie thought about that. No, but it would have been nice to say. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Elena said carefully, Drew's outside. Sophie's head snapped up. What? He's sitting on the porch steps. Has been for about 30 minutes. He hasn't knocked. He hasn't tried to come to the door. He's just sitting there. Sophie walked to the window and looked out. Drew sat on the bottom step, hunched over, holding something in his hands. The plastic piggy bank. She watched him. He didn't move. Didn't look at the door. Didn't try to approach. He just sat there like he had nowhere else to go and no right to ask for anything. He looked different, thinner, older, grey at the temples. His clothes were cheap. She could tell even from here. His whole presence was smaller, quieter, like someone who'd learned to take up less space. Want me to call the police? Elena asked, phone already in hand. Sophie shook her head slowly. No, I'll handle it. She grabbed a sweater and walked outside. Drew didn't look up when the door opened. What are you doing here, Drew? He flinched at the sound of her voice like it caused physical pain. Slowly, he looked up. His eyes were different. The arrogance was gone. The confidence that used to define him had been replaced by something that looked like humility, or maybe just exhaustion. Your light was on. I didn't want to bother you. He trailed off, struggling. I just wanted to be near something good for a minute. I'll leave. He started to stand. Sophie stepped forward. Why do you have that piggy bank? Drew looked down at it, like he'd forgotten he was holding it. It's the only honest thing I have left. $2. Our first date. When we were equals. Before I became... He stopped. Couldn't finish. Before you became what? A monster. His voice broke on the word. Before I became someone who hurt you for no reason except my own ego. He held out the piggy bank to her with shaking hands. I thought you might want it back. It was always yours anyway. Sophie took it. The plastic was cracked now, worn from handling. She opened it and found the $2, the receipt, and something new, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it, Drew's handwriting, messy and raw. I destroyed us. Not because you weren't enough, because I was too broken to see that you were everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. D. Sophie read it twice. The words were simple, not eloquent, Not polished like Drew's usual carefully crafted arguments, just real, raw, painful. She looked at Drew, really looked at him. This wasn't the man who'd filmed Monica opening a Rolls-Royce. This wasn't the man who'd forged her signature without guilt. This wasn't the man who'd given her $2 while spending $30 million on another woman. This was someone else. Someone smaller, yes, but also more real, more human. "You look different," Sophie said. "I am different. I think. I hope." He met her eyes finally. "I've been in therapy for 2 years, volunteering, reading, trying to understand how I became someone capable of hurting you like that. I don't have all the answers yet. I might never have them." "Why are you here?" Drew's voice was barely above a whisper. "Because Grandma Ruth told me in her letter to face the people I hurt, to tell the truth without asking for anything back. So here's my truth, Sophie. I destroyed us because I was empty inside. I filled that emptiness with ego, with work, with Monica, with things that didn't matter. You were never the problem. You were always the answer, and I was too blind and stupid and broken to see it until you were gone." He stood, movements slow like they hurt. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I'm not asking for another chance. I destroyed that right. I just needed you to hear from me, face to face, that you deserved everything I couldn't give you. That this was all my fault, not yours. That losing you was the only thing that woke me up. And I'm grateful you had the strength to walk away, because I would have destroyed us both if you'd stayed." Sophie felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not love. Something more complicated, like watching someone who'd hurt you learn to be human for the first time. "I don't need you anymore, Drew," she said quietly. "I don't hate you. I just don't need you." Drew nodded, eyes bright with tears he didn't let fall. "I know. That's why I came. To hear you say you're happy. To know I didn't destroy you completely." "You didn't." Sophie smiled slightly. "You tried, but I'm stronger than you thought. You were always stronger than I thought. I just never bothered to notice." Long silence. Sophie held the piggy bank, feeling its weight. "Grandma Ruth believed in second chances," Sophie said slowly, "but she also believed they had to be earned over years, not days. I'm not asking. I know you're not. That's why I'm telling you." Sophie took a breath. "If you're still this person in a year, this honest, humble, broken open version of yourself, call me. We'll have coffee, $2, like the beginning. No promises, Drew, no expectations, no guarantees of anything, just coffee, and we'll see." Drew's face crumbled. "I don't deserve that." "No, you don't. But maybe Grandma Ruth saw something in you I couldn't see through all the damage you caused. So prove her right. Not for me, for yourself. Become someone worthy of that coffee. Become someone who doesn't need me to feel whole." Drew nodded, unable to speak. He turned to walk away. "Drew," he stopped. "If you contact me before that year is up, the offer is gone. If you show up here again, it's gone. If you send letters or gifts or try to manipulate this, it's gone. 1 year, earn it, or don't. Your choice." "I understand." He walked down the steps and disappeared into the darkness. Sophie stood on the porch holding the piggy bank and watched him leave. She didn't know if she'd ever love him again, didn't know if he'd actually change permanently, didn't know if she was making a mistake giving him even this tiny sliver of possibility. But for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel rage when she thought about Drew Gosling. She felt something that might have been possibility. Maybe. Chapter 10. Maybe 3 months after Drew left her porch, Sophie stood in her classroom watching Jade accept an early admission letter to college. "I got in," Jade whispered, eyes wide with disbelief and joy. "I actually got in. Full scholarship." "Of course you did," Sophie said, pulling her into a hug. "You're brilliant." "No, I got in because you believed I was brilliant first, before anyone else did, before I did." Sophie didn't correct her this time, just held her student, former student now, and felt proud in a way that had nothing to do with herself and everything to do with watching someone become who they were always meant to be. After class, David called. He was in town for a project, wanted to have dinner. They'd been friends for over a year now, and Sophie liked him more every time they talked. But she still didn't love him, still couldn't quite imagine loving anyone that way again. They met at a small restaurant, nothing fancy. David talked about his kids, his work, the house he was designing for a family who reminded him of what he'd lost. "Do you ever regret your divorce?" Sophie asked. David thought about it. "I regret what led to it, my choices, my priorities, but the divorce itself? No. We both needed to be free to become better versions of ourselves. Sometimes love means letting go." Sophie considered that. "I think Drew is trying to become a better version of himself." "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know yet. Confused, cautious, maybe a little hopeful, but mostly just neutral. Like he's a person I used to know who's becoming someone new, and I'm watching from a distance to see if it's real. That's healthy. Is it? Or am I just scared to feel anything else? Maybe both. Maybe that's okay." They finished dinner. David walked her to her car. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy, Sophie? Really happy?" She thought about her students, the center, Elena, her apartment with its mismatched furniture and ridiculous teacups, her life that was entirely her own. "Yes, I really am." "Then that's all that matters." David smiled. "Everything else is just extra." Sophie drove home feeling settled in a way she hadn't in months. She was happy. That was real. Everything else, Drew, David, the future, was just possibility, not requirement. The next morning, Mrs. Chen came to visit the center with a box of books to donate. "You've built something special here," Mrs. Chen said, watching students work. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Can I tell you something?" Mrs. Chen didn't wait for permission. "My daughter, the one who left her husband 15 years ago, she eventually forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because she was tired of carrying the weight of hating him. They're not together. They never will be. But they're not enemies anymore either. Sometimes that's enough." "Are you telling me I should forgive Drew?" "I'm not telling you anything, just sharing a story. What you do with it is yours to decide." 9 months after Drew sat on her porch, Sophie had almost forgotten his deadline, almost forgotten the promise of maybe she'd made. Then Eleanor told her, "Drew called the bookstore. He asked if you were okay. I told him I wasn't discussing you with him. He said to tell you he wasn't checking up, just hoping you were happy. Then he hung up." Sophie felt something stir, not quite anger, not quite warmth, just awareness. Drew still existed, was still trying, was still becoming whatever he was becoming. The year mark came and went. Sophie half expected a phone call. Nothing came. Another month passed. Still nothing. Sophie realized Drew was waiting, giving her space to decide, not pushing, not manipulating, just waiting. That was new. The old Drew would have called exactly on the deadline, would have assumed her offer was still good, would have expected her to keep her word. This Drew was waiting for her to reach out if and when she was ready. Sophie pulled out the piggy bank she'd kept. The $2 was still inside, along with Drew's note and the original receipt, evidence of who they'd been, evidence of who they'd become. She picked up her phone and stared at Drew's number. Still blocked after 3 years. She could unblock it, could call, could find out if he'd actually changed, or if this was all just performance. Or she could keep living her happy life, could choose herself, could walk away from even the possibility of pain. Her phone buzzed. "David. Hey, I'm in town next week. Dinner?" Sophie smiled. But before she could respond, another message came through. "Eleanor, Drew came to the bookstore again. He bought 3 books, left without saying anything. One of the books was about women who rebuilt their lives after abuse. Thought you should know." Sophie sat down, phone in hand, piggy bank on the table. Drew was still changing, still learning, still trying to become someone different. Was that enough? Would it ever be enough? She didn't know. Maybe she'd never know. She texted Elena. If he comes back, tell him he can call me just to talk. No promises. Elena. You sure? Sophie. No, but maybe that's okay. That night, her phone rang. Unknown number. She knew who it was before she answered. Hello? Sophie? Drew's voice. Quiet, uncertain. Elena said I could call. If this is wrong, if you've changed your mind, I'll hang up right now. I haven't changed my mind, but I haven't decided anything either. That's fair. That's more than fair. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Just present. How have you been? Sophie asked. Different. Better, I think. Still figuring it out. Drew paused. How have you been? Happy. Really happy. Good. That's... His voice caught. That's all I wanted to know. They talked for 20 minutes. Not about the past. Not about the future. Just about the present. Sophie's center, Drew's volunteer work, the books they'd been reading. When they hung up, Sophie realized she'd smiled during the conversation. Not a forced smile. A real one. She texted Eleanor. We talked. It was okay. Eleanor. What now? Sophie. I have no idea. She put her phone down and pulled out her journal, the same journal she'd been writing in for 3 years. Today I talked to Drew for the first time in 3 years. I don't know if he's changed. I don't know if I'll ever trust him. I don't know if there's any future there, but I know this. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of him, not of the past, not of the future. I chose myself once. I can choose myself again, whatever that means. Maybe I give him a real chance. Maybe I don't. Maybe we become friends who talk sometimes. Maybe this was the last conversation we'll ever have. All of those possibilities are okay, because I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm Sophie Wilde, and that's enough. She closed the journal and looked at the piggy bank one more time. $2. That's what she'd walked away with 3 years ago. She'd built a kingdom from $2 and her own strength. If Drew wanted to be part of that kingdom someday, he'd have to prove he was worthy of it. Not just for a year, for the rest of his life. And if he wasn't, if he couldn't, Sophie would still be fine, still be happy, still be whole, because her happiness had never depended on him, and it never would again. The title of her story wasn't The Woman Who Took Him Back. It was The Woman Who Chose Herself First. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for both of them.